Okay, welcome to our lesson about the ARCHICAD Grid Tool add-on. While the construction and snap grid, which are set in the view menu, provide a globally equally distributed net covering the whole view, the grid tool creates a custom local structural grid. The grid created by this tool is interactive, so you can edit this grid system even after placing it. Additionally, the grid tool is able to place dimensions, beams, columns, or optional library parts at the grid intersection points. The grid can be shown on any story. It can appear in any window, not only in floor plan, but also in section elevation, detail, and 3D windows. Alright, defining the grids. The grid system is an ordered structure of grid elements. You can customize a whole grid system in the Grid Systems Settings dialog, which is opened from Design, Grid System, You'll use this same dialog to modify the grid system after placing it. You can also place and modify the grid elements individually. Choose the Grid Element tool from the toolbox to place a grid element, or Grid Element Settings to set their parameters. The geometry of the grid is orthogonal or an arced net. You choose the desired format. You can change grid display options for 2D and 3D views either graphically or using the dialog boxes. Okay, let's close this for now. And we'll go into the toolbox, and down here to the Grid Element tool, we'll double click that. And that brings up our grid element settings. Okay, in the grid element settings, we've got 5 panels. We've got floor plan, section and elevation, naming rules, marker, and the 3D view. Okay, the Grid System Settings dialog helps the user place multiple grid elements at the desired locations. The dialog box contains 4 panels. It's accessed from here, Design, Grid Systems. We have General Settings, Grid Elements, naming rules, and grid positions. The Grid System Settings dialog will preserve the latest settings if you close the dialog with the OK button, even if you don't place a grid on the plan. Okay, the first thing you want to do is select the geometry of the grid system, and we have 2 choices here, either the orthogonal or the arched grid, and for now we'll just select the orthogonal. We also have an option here to place elements at the grid line intersections. So with this button clicked, we can choose from either a column or an object. With this button we can select the settings of the column, and that brings up our column default settings, and here we can set all the parameters for the columns that we'd like placed. Close that. We can also check this box to put the default beams on the grid lines, and if we click this box, Settings, that'll bring up our beam default settings, in which we can define how we want our beams to look. Close that. If we select this box here, dimension lines, it will place the dimensions lines, and again we can access the parameters of the dimensions line by clicking this settings box right here. Click OK. And we can get a total dimension overall by clicking that box there, and again we can select the parameters for that by clicking the settings box here. Okay. We can also select this box here to keep the column and or beam within the grid perimeter. Then we have our grid element settings. We can select this here, and that will bring up our grid element settings. We can select the type of grid line that we'd like. We can select how it looks in section and elevation. We can select the naming rules. For instance, we can start it at A and have the style of ABC, or 1, 2, 3, or lowercase ABC, or Roman numerals. Here we can adjust the parameters of the marker. And here we can select whether to display it in the 3D view. And if we do, it opens up some additional parameters that we can adjust. OK. And here we can select the grid positions. This gives us the horizontal lines. This gives us the vertical lines. If we want to add an additional line, we click on the plus icon. And if we want to subtract a line, we click on the minus icon. And here we can select the layer that the grid is placed on. Okay. Okay, the Grid System Settings dialog box allows us to place multiple grid elements at the desired locations. The dialog box contains 4 panels: General Settings, Grid Elements, Naming Rules, and Grid Positions. Let's go about setting our grid positions. If we click the distribute box here and here, you'll notice that the ability to put the distance in goes away. We will distribute them when we enter the values on the plan. Otherwise, we can uncheck the distribute box, and that'll allow us to put in a distance between each segment. Let's say we'll put in 15 feet. for each one. We'll keep it simple. And we'll go over to the vertical grid. We'll do the same thing. We'll put in 15. Delete this last one. Close that up for now. We'll define our columns. We'll go into the settings for the columns. The columns are 9 foot high. We've already got a square column 1 foot by 1 foot. No veneer. We'll keep it simple for now. We'll show the column on all relevant stories. And pretty much leave the rest of these at the default settings. Paint whitewash, let's make that something we can see a little bit easier. Let's make that Flemish Bond. Click OK. Alright, we've got the default beams on the grid lines. Let's check the settings for that. We've got a profile beam that's 8-inch deep. We have the height at 8 foot. Our columns are 9, so let's make that 9 foot. Let's make the width of that column, say 8 inches also. Or that beam, will make the width of that beam 8 inches. Let's change this back to a foot, starting at 9 foot. Let's paint it red. Make it look like red iron. Select OK. So we've got our geometry method selected. We've selected to place the elements at the grid line intersections. Default beams on the grid lines show the dimensions lines, the total dimensions. And we're going to keep the column and beams within the grid perimeter. We're going to anchor it in this corner here. We're going to show markers all the way around. If we want to change the grid element settings, we can click here. We can change how it looks on the floor plan, the section and elevations. We can change the naming rules. Again, we can change the marker, how it looks in the 3D view, and what layer it's on. Let's put it on the ARCHICAD layer. Click OK. Collapse this box, collapse this box. Everything looks good, and we'll click OK. We'll place our structure. Let's do it over here at the project origin. Now let's zoom in on this. Now we've got 3 sections in one direction at 15 each, 3 sections in the other direction at 15. We've got our outside dimensions already placed, 45, 45. And our grid numbered and lettered. So let's take a look at this in the 3D view. I'll right click, go down to show all in 3D. Fit it in the window. Okay, it appears that the beams are not sitting exactly on top of the columns. Quick easy adjustment is how we do that. We got the beam tool selected. We'll go to Control A and select them all. Right click to bring up our context menu and click on beam selection settings. Right now we have that at 9 foot. We're going to make that 9, 4 and click OK. And now our beams are sitting on top of the columns. They should be red though. Let's check, see what happened. Beam, Control A, beam selection settings. Okay, even though this shows paint red in the model, we've got a profile beam selected. Okay, we're going to have to go into Design, Complex Profiles, Profile Manager. We're going to have to select that steel section. It's the S-steel section right here. We're going to have to edit the chosen profile. Select the profile, click on an edge. That will bring up a pet palette that allows us to change the parameters for the profile edge, this little icon right here. Surface material now is stainless reflective. Let's go down here to paint red. We'll put that on all edges. Click OK. We're going to apply to this selection and store that profile. And close out of this. And now we've got the red painted beams. Okay, let's take a look at some other ways we can change the appearance of this. If we have our grid element tool selected, right click or press Control A to select the grid elements. Right click and click our grid element settings. We can change the way the grid lines look. Right now we have them as solid lines. Okay, these three buttons here give us either a hidden line, a short line, or a full line. Right now we have the full line selected. Let's change that to a short line. Click OK. And you can see how the appearance has changed on the floor plan. Click Undo. Okay, we can also select which stories to show the grid on. Right now we've got current story only. We can show it one story up, one story down, one story up and down, all stories, or custom. If we select Edit Custom, we can go into a list of the stories and place a check mark on the stories that we want. Select 1 and 2, click OK. Click OK. And go to our project navigator, click on the second floor. And now you can see we have the grid on the second floor. Okay, with the grid element tool selected, let's go Control A, grid element settings. Change that back to a full line. Click OK. Let's go back down to the first floor. One last thing we can illustrate is the ARCHICAD. Select this existing grid and delete it. Design, grid system. Select the geometry for the ARCHICAD. As in the orthogonal, we've got elements, default, beams, dimension lines, and total dimensional selected. We have to go down here to grid positions, and we've got some distances here. 15, 8, let's just make it an even 15. We'll make this one 10. We'll subtract one of those. Click OK. Position this. Click. Click again. And now you can see that everything's been placed as before on an ArcNet. We'll take a look at that in 3D. And there we go.